I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I realized love was the only thing I was allowed to give. My name is Hannah Reed. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that being the dependable one was something to be proud of. My family certainly thought so. When my father's small construction business failed, I was the one who figured out how to stretch my paycheck to help cover bills. When my younger sister, Claire, dropped out of college after changing majors for the third time, I told everyone she just needed time to figure herself out. When my mother cried at night after the divorce, I sat beside her, holding her hand, telling her everything would be okay, even when I wasn't sure it would. I became the steady one, the fixer, the person everyone leaned on without asking if I was tired. And for a long time, I thought that meant I was loved. I worked as a nurse at a private clinic, long hours, rotating shifts, the kind of job that leaves your body aching even on your days off. But I never complained. Every extra shift meant I could help a little more. A little more became a lot. At first, the help made sense. Temporary support during hard times. Then hard times stopped being temporary. My father never fully recovered financially. My mother started depending on me for things she used to handle herself. Claire moved from one unstable relationship to another, each one ending with her back at someone's house, usually mine. I didn't notice the shift right away. The way requests slowly stopped sounding like requests. Can you help me with rent this month? Turned into, you'll help me, right? Could you come over? Turned into, I need you here. I said yes, because saying no felt cruel. Because every time I hesitated, someone reminded me, we're family. That word carried weight, it carried guilt. And it kept me from noticing how much of myself was disappearing. My apartment looked like a storage unit for everyone else's. My mother's extra furniture in the spare room, bills I paid quietly so no one felt embarrassed. I told myself this was temporary. Temporary is a comforting lie. One Friday evening, after a 12-hour shift, I came home exhausted. My feet throbbed, my shoulders tight from lifting patients all day. I wanted nothing more than a shower and silence. Instead, I opened the door to voices. Claire was sitting on my couch with two friends. I didn't know, wine glasses on my coffee table, music playing softly. She looked up and smiled like everything was normal. Oh, hey. You're home early. Early. It was almost 9 at night. I forced a smile. Didn't know you had people over? She waved a hand dismissively. We'll be quiet. I nodded, too tired to argue, and went straight to my room. Through the wall, I could hear laughter. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like a guest in my own home. That was the first moment I felt something shift. Not anger. Something heavier. Resentment. The next morning, I found empty bottles in the sink and a note from Claire. Thanks. We had fun. No apology. No cleanup. I cleaned the kitchen before leaving for another shift. Because that's what I did. Weeks passed like that. Work, family needs, quiet exhaustion. Then my mother called one afternoon while I was driving home. Your father needs help with his car payment, she said without greeting. I gripped the steering wheel. Tighter? I just helped last month. Well, she said, voice sharpening slightly, he's struggling. I swallowed. I'm struggling too, Mom. Silence. Then she sighed. You always make things work. The compliment felt like a trap. I transferred the money that night, and then sat staring at my bank balance, feeling a strange emptiness. It wasn't just the money. It was the assumption. No one asked if I could. They just expected I would. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It was my birthday. I hadn't planned anything big. Just dinner with family at my mother's house. I arrived carrying a small cake I bought on the way. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. familiar, comforting. Everyone was there. My parents, Claire, a few cousins. For a moment, it felt warm, safe. We ate. We laughed. I relaxed. Then, halfway through dinner, my mother raised her glass. "To Hannah," she said, smiling. "The one we can always count on." Everyone clapped lightly. I smiled. But then my father added, laughing, "Yeah, if we didn't have her, we'd all be homeless." The table laughed harder. Something inside me went quiet. It was a joke. But it wasn't, because it was true. Claire leaned over and said, "Seriously, you're like our safety net." I looked around the table. Everyone smiling, everyone comfortable. And suddenly I realized something terrifying. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as stability, as a solution, as someone who would always be there no matter what. I blew out my candles that night feeling strangely hollow. When I got home, my apartment was messy again. Claire's laundry piled on the chair, dishes in the sink. I stood in the doorway, still wearing my coat, and felt something crack quietly inside me. Not dramatically, just finally. I sat on the edge of my bed and whispered out loud, "I'm tired." No one heard it, but it felt like the first honest thing I'd said in years. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about the toast, the laughter, and for the first time, a thought appeared clearly. What would happen if I stopped being the person they depended on? The idea felt impossible, and yet peaceful. I didn't know it yet, but that question was the beginning of the end. The question stayed with me all week. What would happen if I stopped? I tried to ignore it. Routine helped. Work helped. At the clinic, problems had solutions. People either healed or they didn't, but at least everything felt honest. Family was different. Family blurred the lines between love and obligation until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. On Wednesday night, I came home to find Claire sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. She looked up casually. "Hey, do you mind if I stay a little longer?" Things with Jason got weird again. A little longer. She had been temporarily staying with me for almost 4 months. I set my bag down slowly. "How much longer?" She shrugged. "I don't know. Until I figure things out." The answer felt familiar. Endless. I nodded, too tired to fight, and went to shower. Under the hot water, I stared at the tiles and realized I couldn't remember the last time my home felt peaceful. There was always someone needing something. Always noise. Always expectations. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was getting ready for work. "Mom, Hannah, can you stop by after work? Your father needs help organizing some paperwork." I closed my eyes briefly. "You always say that," she replied, not angry, just disappointed. Guilt hit instantly. "I'll try," I said. I hung up and stared at my reflection. When did trying become the same as promising? That evening, I dragged myself to my parents' house anyway. My father barely looked up when I arrived. "Hey, kid," he muttered, sliding a stack of bills toward me. "Can you make sense of this?" I sat down and started sorting through paperwork. Unpaid notices, late fees, avoidable problems. I worked quietly while they watched TV. After an hour, I realized something. No one had asked how my day was. No one even offered me dinner. I finished, explained everything, and stood to leave. My mother smiled warmly. "We don't know what we'd do without you." The words used to make me proud. Now they felt heavy. Driving home, I felt exhaustion settle into my bones. Not physical exhaustion, emotional. The kind that comes from always being needed but never truly seen. When I walked into my apartment, music was playing again. Claire and a friend were laughing in the living room. I stopped in the doorway. She looked up. Oh, hey, we're just hanging out. I nodded slowly. My eyes landed on a pizza box, empty glasses, and crumbs scattered across my coffee table. Something inside me tightened. I went to my room without saying anything. That night, I lay awake listening to laughter through the wall. And for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own life. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table alone. Claire stumbled in, hair messy, grabbing water from the fridge. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm tired." She laughed lightly. "You're always tired." The comment wasn't cruel, just careless. But it landed hard. I looked at her. "Claire, I need you to start looking for another place." She froze. "What? I need my space back." Her face shifted instantly. "Are you serious?" "Yes," she laughed, disbelief turning sharp. "Wow. Okay. Guess I'm a burden." "Now, that's not what I said. It's what you mean." I felt my chest tighten. "I just need boundaries." She rolled her eyes. "Everyone keeps talking about boundaries lately. What happened to you?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to explain that I was finally noticing things I had ignored for years. She stormed out, slamming the door. The silence afterward felt strange, but peaceful. That afternoon, my mother called. Claire had already told her, "You're kicking your sister out?" She asked, voice strained. "I'm asking her to find her own place. She's going through a hard time." I swallowed. "So am I." Silence. Then the familiar line, "You've always been the strong one." This time, something in me resisted. "Mom," I said softly, "being strong doesn't mean carrying everyone forever." She sighed heavily. "I don't understand why you're being like this." Neither did I, fully. But I knew I couldn't go back. The next few days felt tense. Texts from family came in. Everything. "Okay," Claire says, "you're upset. Don't push people away." No one asked what I needed, only why I was changing. On Saturday, my mother invited me to dinner again. I almost said no. But guilt won. The table felt different this time. Conversations cautious. Claire barely looked at me. Halfway through the meal, my father said casually, "So, your mom mentioned you're making Claire move out?" The room quieted. I felt every eye on me. "She needs her own space," I said calmly. My aunt frowned. "Family. Helped family." I smiled faintly. "I have been helping," Claire scoffed. "Yeah, and now you're done. Apparently," my mother sighed. "We're just worried you're becoming cold." Cold. The word stung. I looked around the table. Everyone waiting for me to apologize, to soften, to go back to being predictable. Instead, I said quietly, "I'm just tired of being responsible for everyone." The silence that followed was thick, uncomfortable. My father shook his head. "You're overreacting." I felt something settle inside me. Calm. "No," I said softly. "I'm finally reacting." I stood, thanked them for dinner, and left. No one stopped me. Driving home, I realized my hands weren't shaking. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. When I got home, Claire's bedroom door was closed. The apartment felt heavy with unspoken tension. I sat on the couch and stared at the quiet room. And suddenly, I understood something. They didn't want me happy. They wanted me available. That realization hurt. But it also felt freeing. 3 days later, Claire moved out. She left without saying goodbye. The apartment felt bigger, lighter. I expected loneliness. Instead, I felt relief so strong it almost scared me. But peace didn't last. That evening, my family group chat exploded. "Can't believe you did this!" "She's your sister." You've changed. I stared at the messages. The pattern was clear. The moment I stopped giving, I became the problem. I put my phone down and whispered into the quiet room. Maybe. I needed to change. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The apartment stayed quiet after Claire left. No loud phone calls. No late-night laughter. No dishes waiting for me in the sink. At first, the silence felt strange. Then it started to feel good. I began noticing small things I had forgotten I enjoyed reading before bed. Cooking without rushing, sitting on the couch without feeling like I was waiting for someone to need me. For the first time in years, my home felt like mine. But peace has a way of making people uncomfortable when they're used to chaos. 2 days later, my mother called again. Her voice sounded careful, almost rehearsed. "Your sister's really upset," she said. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I know." "She feels abandoned." The word hit hard. Abandoned. I closed my eyes. "Mom, she's 32. That doesn't mean she doesn't need support." I exhaled slowly. "I've supported her for years." Silence stretched between us. Then she said quietly, "You used to be more patient." There it was again. The version of me they preferred. The one who never pushed back. "I'm still patient," I said. "I'm just not ignoring myself anymore." She sighed, disappointed. "We just don't recognize you lately." When we hung up, I stood there staring at my phone. I realized something painful. They didn't see my boundaries as growth. They saw them as betrayal. The following weekend, my cousin Lisa invited me to lunch. I almost declined, worried it would turn into another conversation about how I'd changed. But Lisa surprised me. Halfway through our meal, she said quietly, "I think you're doing the right thing." I blinked. "You do?" She nodded. "You've always carried everyone. People get comfortable with that." Her words felt like a breath of fresh air. "I didn't realize how tired I was," I admitted. She smiled softly. "Sometimes you don't notice until you stop." For the first time in weeks, I felt understood. But the calm didn't last long. I opened the door and froze. He stood there with crossed arms, jaw tight. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, looking around the quiet space like something was missing. "She's really struggling," he said without preamble. "Claire." He nodded. "She had to move into a tiny place. She's upset." I waited. He looked at me. "You could have handled this differently." I felt a familiar wave of guilt rise. But this time, it didn't drown me. "I gave her months," I said calmly. He shook his head. "You're family. You don't just stop helping." I met his eyes. I didn't stop helping. I stopped sacrificing myself. His expression hardened. "You sound selfish." The word hung in the air. Old me would have apologized instantly. Instead, I said quietly, "Maybe I should have been selfish sooner." He stared at me like he didn't know who I was. Then he stood abruptly. "I don't understand you anymore." And just like that, he left. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I sat down slowly, heart pounding. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. But beneath the pain was something else. Clarity. That night, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from family. "Your dad is really upset. Why are you pushing everyone away? This isn't like you." I stared at the screen. No one asked why I felt the way I did. Only why I wasn't behaving the way they wanted. I turned my phone face down and went to bed. The next morning at work, I felt distracted. A patient's daughter thanked me for being kind to her mother, and the simple gratitude almost made me cry. Because strangers noticed my effort more than my own family did. That realization stayed with me. A few days later, my mother called again. Her voice was softer this time. "Dinner on Sunday," she said. "Everyone will be there." I hesitated. I don't know. Please, she said quietly. We need to talk. Something in her tone made me agree. Sunday arrived heavy with tension. The house felt the same as always, familiar smells, familiar voices, but the atmosphere was different, careful, measured. I sat at the table feeling like an outsider. Dinner started politely. Small talk, safe topics. Then my aunt cleared her throat. We're worried about you, she said gently. I looked up. My mother nodded. You've pulled away from everyone. I swallowed. I've been trying to take care of myself. Claire laughed softly. By cutting everyone off. I felt heat rise in my chest. The room went quiet. I looked around the table. Every face, waiting, judging, expecting me to explain myself. Again, something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, just decisively. I spent years taking care of all of you, I said quietly. And the moment I asked for space, I became the bad guy. No one answered. My father shook his head. That's not fair. I laughed softly. No, I said. What wasn't fair was assuming I'd always say yes. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We just need you, she whispered. The words hurt more than anger would have, because they were honest. And that was the problem. They needed me. But they didn't see me. I stood slowly. I love you, I said quietly. But I can't keep living like this. My father frowned. What does that mean? I took a breath. It felt like stepping off a cliff. It means I need distance. The room exploded with reactions. What? You're overreacting. You're being dramatic. I felt strangely calm. For the first time, their voices didn't pull me back. I picked up my coat. My mother's voice cracked. Hannah, don't walk away. I paused at the door. Tears burned behind my eyes. I'm not walking away from you, I said softly. I'm walking away from the version of me that disappeared. And then I left. Outside, the night air felt cold and clean. I sat in my car, hands trembling. I expected panic. Instead, I felt relief. Deep, quiet. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't go back. The silence after that dinner felt different. Final. No angry calls that night. No desperate messages. Just quiet. I drove home slowly, hands still trembling from the adrenaline. When I walked into my apartment, the stillness wrapped around me like something fragile. I set my keys down and sat on the couch. Without turning on the lights, for the first time in years, no one expected anything from me. And it felt both terrifying and peaceful. The next morning, my phone exploded. Messages flooded in, one after another. How could you leave like that? Your mother is devastated. You're tearing the family apart. I stared at the screen for a long time. The pattern was familiar. Everything was about how my choices affected them. No one asked how I felt. I typed one message into the group chat. I need space. Please respect that. Then I muted the conversation. My chest felt tight, but also lighter than it had in years. The days that followed were strange. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner, watched movies without interruption. Simple things felt new. But grief crept in quietly. Not grief for losing my family. Grief for realizing how conditional their comfort with me had been. One evening, while folding laundry, I started crying unexpectedly. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears. I missed them. I missed who I thought we were. And that hurt more than the conflict itself. A week passed, then two. No calls from my parents. No texts from Claire. At first, I kept checking my phone. Eventually, I stopped. I started filling my time differently. Long walks after work, coffee with coworkers I used to decline because I was always busy, sleeping in on my days off instead of rushing to solve someone else's problem. I felt myself slowly returning, like waking up from a long, exhausting dream. 1. Saturday morning, I sat at a cafe with a book when someone called my name. I looked up. My mother stood there, hesitant. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired, I stood slowly. "Hi," I said. She sat across from me, twisting her hands together. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." I swallowed. I wasn't sure either. Silence settled between us. "Finally," she said quietly, "the house feels different without you." I didn't know how to respond, she continued. "We didn't realize how much you were carrying." The words surprised me. I studied her face. She looked sincere. I didn't realize either. I admitted. She nodded slowly. "I think we got used to you fixing everything." Tears stung my eyes. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first time someone had acknowledged it. We talked for almost an hour. Carefully, no accusations, no guilt, just honesty. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "Are you coming back?" she asked softly. I took a breath. "I don't know. And for the first time, she didn't argue. After she left, I sat back down and stared at my coffee. Something inside me felt calmer, not healed, but steadier. The weeks moved forward quietly. My father sent a short text one evening. "Hope you're doing okay?" No lecture, no pressure, just simple words. I replied, "I'm okay. Hope you are too." Claire never reached out. And surprisingly, that didn't hurt as much anymore. Some relationships need distance too. Grow. Others fade when they lose access to what they were taking. I stopped trying to control the outcome. Life began to feel balanced. At work, I started taking fewer extra shifts. I joined a weekend yoga class. I laughed more. One afternoon, a coworker said, "You seem lighter lately." I smiled. I think I finally learned how to rest. The biggest change wasn't external. It was internal. I no longer felt responsible for everyone's happiness. And that realization felt like breathing fresh air. After years underground, months passed. One evening, I drove past my parents' neighborhood. I didn't stop. But I didn't feel guilt either. Just calm. I realized something then. Walking away hadn't been about abandoning them. It had been about finding myself again. I still loved my family. But love didn't mean disappearing. Love didn't mean saying yes until there was nothing left of me. Sometimes, love meant stepping back. Choosing distance over resentment. Choosing peace over obligation. That night, I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker on. I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who believed her value came from how much she could carry. She wasn't weak. She was just tired. And now, finally, she was learning to put the weight down. I didn't know what the future with my family would look like. Maybe closer, maybe quieter. But I knew one thing for certain. I would never go back to being the person who disappeared to keep everyone else comfortable. Because walking, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life belonged to me again. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been the one who carried everyone until you finally chose yourself, subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories like this coming, and sometimes hearing them reminds us we're not alone.